Well, good evening, and welcome to Reimagine Job Spotlight on Land Reclamation. I'm your host, Cindy Rogers, and I am from Indiana, Pennsylvania. I'm the president of Evergreen Conservancy, which is a local county-based land trust. So this topic is sort of near and dear to my heart. We manage a passive abandoned mine discharge system. We monitor water quality all over the county, and we do a lot of environmental education about anything related to water and outdoors. So enough about me. We are excited to be joined tonight by several esteemed panelists who are working on land reclamation in the region. Tonight's program is part of the Reimagine Job Showcase, which is a website, which I believe Kelly put in the chat, that was launched in September of 2020. The goal of this website is to highlight sustainable economic development initiatives and job opportunities in and around Southwest Pennsylvania. The website features local businesses and organizations in 9 sectors of sustainable economic development. And tonight's program on land reclamation is the 9th in a series of programs that we're launching, diving deeper into each of the 9 sectors. We encourage you to take a look at the website and explore the exhibitors and opportunities listed. Tonight's program will feature presentations by Bobby Hughes of Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation, Becca Simon of Grounded Strategies, and John Dawes of the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds. These presenters will highlight current initiatives and opportunities in land reclamation. We'll then have an opportunity for general questions and answers, and we ask that you put your questions for all the panelists in the chat. After the Q&A, we'll have breakouts where you'll be able to choose the room that most interests you, and in that breakout, you'll be able to network and have more specific, informal conversations about that topic. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I'd like to introduce Bobby Hughes. He is the founding executive director of EPCAMR since May of 1997. He's coordinated over 20 years of statewide conferences on abandoned mine land reclamation and AMD remediation in Pennsylvania. He's a co-author of a Cornell University Press book entitled Grassroots to Global: Broader Impacts of Civic Ecology, and a co-author of a children's environmental education activity book entitled The AMD Avengers versus Pollution Posse. He's testified before the House Natural Resources Committee in Congress 3 times, and in the last few years on abandoned mine land reclamation, innovative ways to reclaim abandoned mine lands, remediate streams impacted by AMD, and on economic development opportunities and job creation in Northern Appalachia. And he's received the American Institute for Public Services Jefferson Award in the Wyoming Valley and was recently named the Keystone Award winner by the Pennsylvania Association of Environmental Educators in 2020. Welcome, Bobby. It's all yours.
Thank you, Cindy, for having me this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing here in northeastern Pennsylvania's anthracite region and the north central part of the state, where we also do have some bituminous coal fields that are very similar to Southwest PA. And we do have a partner organization in Western Pennsylvania known as the Western Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation that is a part of the larger Pennsylvania Abandoned Mine Land campaign that John and I are a part of. I wanted to see if Mark could maybe just put up the brochure quickly to give a quick overview of EPCAMR and some of the things that we do before I kind of dive into another part of the presentation that will kind of highlight some of the potential job creation and workforce development opportunities that could be seen here in Pennsylvania with the passage potentially of this infrastructure bill and so reauthorization of what we are really counting on in the Abandoned Mine Land Trust Fund and SMAC Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act reauthorization. I just kind of put a brochure here to show you the Northeast region and North Central part of the state that we work on. 16 counties in Northeastern and North Central PA are the areas that EPCAMR, our regional nonprofit that works with partner and county conservation districts, community watershed organizations, our local municipalities. There's 114 underserved school districts in Northeastern and North Central Pennsylvania that we don't get to work with every one of them, but we try to get to many of them in the region to do outdoor environmental education programs. We do a lot of water monitoring and technical assistance that we provide to these community groups, and not only in just grant writing, but mind mapping and some other types of jobs that I'll talk about that some of the staff have within our office, and the kind of programs that we do get involved with throughout Northeastern and North Central Pennsylvania to deal with our abandoned mine drainage problems and our abandoned mine lands that are in need of reclamation. Just on that brochure, it's kind of hard to tell, but the red streams that are showing up there in one of the geographic information system layers are all of the streams in the anthracite coal region, where we particularly work in the 4 major coal fields of Northeastern PA that have really been degraded by abandoned mine drainage with pollution from aluminum and iron and manganese that end up kind of polluting our waterways and causing problems for our aquatic and fish life, particularly our native brook trout populations. And we do have other projects that go on up in the Tioga County area, Bradford, Susquehanna, Sullivan, Lycoming, and Wyoming County as well, where some really beautiful streams are up there that we're trying to keep that way by making improvements to existing mine drainage treatment facilities in partnership with the state government through the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation and the federal government through the Office of Surface Mine and Reclamation and Enforcement. So that's just a quick overview. You can check out our website and some of the other social media pages there to get some more details, or the exhibitor page that is going to be provided to the Reimagine jobs link that has already been provided. What I really wanted to do is take a few moments to give a little visual example of some of the type of jobs that we're talking about that we already have that we could obviously use additional funding for. There are more jobs that could be created around this sort of transition away from the coal here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. Many of that industry has already been in serious decline since the mid 70s. And we're looking at a lot of the abandoned mine sites, and we're nearly 50 years out, and we're still trying to recover from many of the impacts of that legacy mining. But I'm going to go through just a few of these to give you an example of, not only what EPCAMR does, but these are the jobs that are out there that myself and my staff included are literally juggling probably 15 to 16 types of grant opportunities on a yearly basis just to keep ourselves whole. And saying whole means like full-time employees, and being able to provide them with benefits and be able to provide them with staff supplies and needs to do this work in the field in our region, in our communities. And some of our staff are still part-time because we just don't have enough funding right now to be able to bring them on to do the additional work that we need. So we do end up getting spread thin. And it's a part of the nonprofit world, but we take the partnerships and the projects that we can get funded, and we work them, and we do the best we can, and then we move on to another project. But what I wanted to do was kind of give examples in my presentation of just those types of jobs, and I'll kind of run through them to give you a better idea of what's out there and still what needs to be done. And we're doing it, but we could still use more people because of this large coverage area that we're in. As I imagine, folks in southwestern Pennsylvania can do the same, and central Pennsylvania that also has a lot of mining impacts. And the type of field technicians that go out and assess and monitor our rivers and streams are needed to sample the mine drainage. And there's water pollution biologists who also sample and survey the rivers and streams for both aquatic ecosystems health and the fishery values. So there's other jobs that are out there. There's visual habitat assessments that we do in the field of rivers and stream corridors for determining the type of impacts that have already occurred on the land and may need to have improvements to both stream bank stabilization stabilization efforts, removal of material and coal waste that's up against the toe of the banks into our rivers and streams that are causing sedimentation issues to the Chesapeake Bay or the Delaware River and the Delaware Estuary are two of the major areas that we work in our part of the state. There's technical assistance that needs to be provided to both the local governments and municipalities to try and navigate their municipal stormwater issues that are in some of these urban environments that were pre-coal and now they're being converted and still have all these older issues with some unfunded mandates to deal with stormwater and the lack of resources that they really have to take care of some of these issues. And environmental educators, obviously, we do a lot of environmental education and we work with these youth in our communities and we take them out. And I can tell you, just during this pandemic alone in the last year or so, we have not seen more of a need to get people outdoors than we have during this pandemic. And some of the things that we've been able to do is get them to these places that were reclaimed, where we have trails and we have clean water and we have mine drainage treatment facilities that have been serving as our educational centers for these students when they have these opportunities to get out in their neighborhoods and in their communities to really see some things that they've never seen before and educate them about how we're cleaning up the environment and how they can partake in that effort with their families, whether it's through cleanups or tree plantings or watershed monitoring. So these are some of the things that we can do. We utilize urban outreach coordinators and our environmental educators to go out and build capacity from within these communities. Some of the more technical stuff that could be done and that's provided that EPCAMR does is through three-dimensional surface and underground mine mapping and modeling efforts that we do to try and get an understanding of how much water is really underneath the ground in many of our regions that are coming out of our mine discharges to see how we can utilize that water as a resource and not just see it as a pollutant. So we have some innovative three-dimensional modeling efforts that go on throughout the years with funding as it becomes available to do that. And our GIS, geographic information staff and technicians and specialists are really doing that work in partnership with the state to kind of catalog, scan, georeference, and digitize all these surface and underground mine maps across Pennsylvania and interpret those so that we could get a better handle on where would be good places to locate businesses and potential job locations for job centers and industrial parks potentially on formerly reclaimed abandoned mine sites. And along with that, dealing with community development and having organizers and program people to write grants and do the grant research to seek additional funds from foundations and state and federal grants and put those together to pull together viable projects through coalition building, which is really what we do in our coalfield communities, is a lot of the effort that needs to be done and continues to be done in our part of the state. Those program managers kind of oversee a lot of these reclamation efforts. There's dam removals, there's natural stream channel design projects, there's tree plantings and riparian restoration, and then there's illegal dump site cleanups and the planting of areas like Centralia, Pennsylvania, which earlier this year we planted 150 apple trees, which has never been done after 8 years of cleanups to remove every bit of trash and debris that had been down there historically dumped on since the probably late 80s, where a lot of that just became a dumping ground as the fire continued to burn out in that particular town. But then new things like green infrastructure is being talked about now, and we're aiding municipalities in best management practices to reduce flooding and to control runoff and soil erosion from these abandoned mine lands that are being redeveloped. So even there, we're finding ways to invest in the communities and put in these green infrastructure projects to reduce some of these problems that we're having. So those are just some of the things that EPCAMR does as staff around the region, and some of these pictures really depict some of those efforts out there. And some of the jobs are not that clean if we're not in clean water doing watershed assessments, but we're out kind of maintaining treatment systems. As you can see, one of my coworkers trying to repair an area where a weir water had gone around it with all the mine drainage. Sometimes we can get stuck up to our chests in mine drainage in iron oxide or aluminum hydroxide, iron oxide and aluminum oxide in some of these treatment areas that we work on. But that's the idea, some of the opportunities that are out there. In terms of land reclamation, there's these ancillary jobs and there's these other jobs that can come about when you start looking at these large tracts of land that could be reclaimed. And I just want to give some examples of those. Heavy equipment operators, fuels managers, project managers for these jobs, truck drivers that have to haul this material away from the sites or bring rock into the sites. We partner with cogeneration facility managers, and they need employees to work at the cogen plants that remove the waste coal and burn it and generate electricity. There's material processors and material handlers, equipment operators, the mechanics. These are all other jobs that are a part of the land reclamation and the bigger picture of the kind of work that we do and what we see in the region that maybe some people don't really think about. You need your mining engineers. You need people to develop the design and construction of the E&S controls on these sites. You need fence companies and installers, rock screen equipment operators, water quality folks that do the monitoring, AMD, mine drainage treatment plant operators. When we talk infrastructure, we're really trying to emphasize that we need active treatment. And to get active treatment, you need to have people to run those plants, and those can create long-term jobs, much like we see in the wastewater industry when we have to take care of sewage and kind of keep our waters clean that are going into the rivers. We may be needing to do the same thing for abandoned mine drainage here in the future and count that as clean water infrastructure. And with that are going to come a lot of jobs, we think, and we hope that there's a direction that can go. And we're kind of emphasizing that with the passage of this infrastructure bill, and maybe those funds could be utilized for some of that AMD treatment as well. Just a few other examples, and then I'll let others take over and talk about some other stuff, and I can talk later in the breakout. Seed companies for grass mixes and wildflower vegetated cover for these E&S controls that we work with. Quarry companies for the stone, for the rock entrances and the conveyance of water, and the swales to control runoff from surface water diversions that might be needed on these sites as we're reclaiming them. Straw and silt fence companies to do E&S control, concrete and macadam companies for road construction entrances into the sites to keep mud off the main roads in our communities, diesel delivery services, and utility workers even to establish power at the sites. When you see a job site and a trailer is there and they need power, they got to hook it up from the main road and get power to it. So there's all these other ancillary jobs that could be created as a part of the land reclamation picture here. And I just want to give you that overview and example of some of the work that we do as a nonprofit, but then also that there's these other jobs, industries, and sectors that are out there for land reclamation. And later I'll talk maybe more about some of the other alternative energy type things that are going on that we're also working on in the solar sector and the geothermal sector that deal with mine drainage and underground mine pools, and then solar potential on reclaimed abandoned mine sites. So with that, I'll pass it on back to Cindy and let her move to the next person, and be happy to take questions later.
Thank you for all that great information, Bobby. Now we're going to move on to our second presentation. Becca Simon. Becca was born and raised in Oregon. She received her undergrad degree in international political economy and environmental policy and decision making from the University of the Puget Sound in 2019. Post-undergrad, Becca served as a Food Corps AmeriCorps service member in Rowan, Montana, doing nutrition, gardening, and environmental justice education with the kindergarten to 5th grade students. After Food Corps, Becca moved to Pittsburgh to serve as a fellow with the Repair the World Pittsburgh, where she was committed to helping engage the Pittsburgh community in acts of service and learning. Through her fellowship, she was partnered with the Grounded Strategies to help with volunteer outreach, and has since joined the team as a full-time member, where she is able to continue supporting community members in their goals of restoring vacant land, building community, and improving the environment of Pittsburgh. As the project manager of policy and land stewardship at Grounded, Becca supports neighborhood scale program initiatives and projects related to Grounded's vacant land stewardship policy and systems change work. This work specifically focuses on working with community members and key stakeholders to create long-term and sustainable ownership and greening strategies for vacant lots in the city and the county. Welcome, Becca.
Thanks, Cindy. Let me just pull up my screen real quick. I'll share my presentation. All right. So for those of you who haven't heard of Grounded, Grounded Strategies is a nonprofit founded in 2007 out of the Heinz College through research on economic impact of vacant land. Over the past decade, our work has evolved in many ways, but has always included cross-sector collaboration, research and innovation, and working hand in hand with those most closely impacted by decisions made at all levels. So our mission works to improve the economic, social, and environmental health of distressed and transitional communities by building capacity to reclaim vacant land and underutilized land as well. So we envision a region of thriving communities with engaged, motivated, and equipped individuals working together to sustain positive change. We believe lasting change happens when people have the tools to take steps towards creating safe, green, resilient, and livable spaces on the ground and are weighing in on systems that affect them. So we strive to build capacity by providing knowledge, tools, and networks so residents can take action on these lots. We also see or strive to reclaim green space. So one vacant lot at a time, turning liability into opportunity. And then we seek to improve the process. So simply trying to demystify the process and policy to increase equity, transparency, and accountability. And all of this in pursuit of trying to improve development and community for the community. So we do this by mobilizing residents, policymakers, and like-minded organizations to ensure communities have resources, knowledge, tools, and partners to make change happen in the places they live, work, and play. And so we take a really people, places, and processes tactic to this, whether that be focused on trying to increase job opportunities in the area, trying to improve ownership of land, create better designs on vacant lots. In general, just really trying to make it a very inclusive and equitable process. So here's just one example of vacant lots compared to essentially like one maintained, one not, or unmaintained. And just for context, I don't know how many of you all are from Pittsburgh or are not from Pittsburgh, but in the city of Pittsburgh, we're looking at 30,000 vacant lots and 60,000 in the county. And about 13,000 of those vacant lots are city owned. So we're looking at nearly a quarter of Pittsburgh's land being vacant. So it was a city built for 1 million people, and we are now down to 300,000. A lot of this vacancy is due to loss of industry, suburbanization, and disinvestment. We experience a 45% population loss over 50 years. And as we see with these vacant lots, much of it's concentrated in communities that have experienced decades of disinvestment and racist land use policies, including redlining. So there's a lot of work to be done to reclaim this land and turn it into viable opportunities for the community and by the community. And we see this as an emerging economic sector that can actually be tapped into by local entrepreneurs, nonprofits, governments, and private sectors to improve on development tactics. So let's see, let me jump ahead in the slide. So while we see generational wealth from ownership and development land as a large push in economic growth for communities, we also see numerous ways for communities to step up as stewards, ambassadors, and managers of this land through incentive and income-based jobs. So with those 13,000 vacant lots in the city, we see a lot of opportunity for community involvement in how that land is maintained and opportunities to provide incentives for doing so, trying to create empowerment through reclaiming that land for the community as well. So one thing we talk about at Grounded a lot is the process of the ambassador model. So ambassador models can come in many different forms. We try to structure them in ways that support the specific community needs. But the basic idea of ambassador model is that we see that residents are the ones who understand the needs of their communities best. We don't try to go in and make changes for the community. We see that the community is very capable of making choices for themselves, and that they should be in part of every step of that decision making. And so to this point, Grounder recruits residents from project neighborhoods to serve as ambassadors. In this case, we're talking about green stormwater initiatives. So as we talk about climate change, especially in Pittsburgh, we're going to see higher rates of rain, and this is going to have direct impact on stormwater in the city. So just for context on that, Pittsburgh has a large amount of combined sewer flow or sewer overflow issues. Our sewers were built to have this combined inflow system of rainwater and sewage. And so when that's overflowed due to flooding, we see further irrigation of that flooding space within communities that actually directly impacts them, is flooding into basements, overflow issues, backflow issues. And so with the ambassadors, we work with them to help have them act as the front line of education and outreach on issues of CSOs and ways that we can tackle issues of stormwater overflow through green stormwater infrastructure, whether that be rain catchment systems, rain gardens, or better drainage systems on vacant lots. We hand over those reins to them to really make those decisions. And our role in that is really recruiting, training, and paying residents and community members to help educate, engage, and run demonstration projects to show that there's opportunities for growth with GSI. And we do this through a $15 an hour compensation. And we see this as a really important opportunity, really engage that minimum wage and really try to increase that over time as well. And not only are we compensating, but we're providing training too. We're offering opportunities for them to engage directly with individuals from the government, from sub-government groups, or from organizations. And so that training really provides them with the steps to go into their communities and conduct things like educational sessions, or collect surveys and data, or do these demonstration process. And we also provide supply funds so they can actually do these projects. Now, this is just one way of modeling the ambassador program. There's a lot of different ways you can structure it, as I said before. You can look at PowerCorps by Philly, which is actually an AmeriCorps program, which they get some of their funding from AmeriCorps. And this is a stipend-based program for residents to take part in doing similar like stormwater initiatives or neighborhood cleanups. And then there's also Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, who's also doing an ambassador program called the Good Neighbor Ambassadors. And those ambassadors are also paid compensation to be doing work in their communities. And it's a little bit more of a built-out program. We're looking to expand this ambassador program through different sectors as well. But Northeast Ohio's program right now has capacity to really bring in a larger number of ambassadors and provide them with a larger amount of resources, including things like truck access if they're trying to transport materials, or higher job training, bring in coursework for people to go into university classes or vocational classes. So there's a lot of growth within this specific sector of ambassadors. And by having ambassadors, they're able to give directly back to their communities and their neighborhoods and help solve continuous issues that happen in the city, especially things like climate change. And there's a lot of opportunities for this to really grow within different sectors, including the private sector, especially when companies start to really engage with how they better support communities through these projects. Another opportunity we talk about is vacant land maintenance. So with those 13,000 city lots, there's a lot of work to be done. Mowing isn't easy, it takes time, and there's a lot more to be done than just mowing lots. So one platform we've really worked on a lot with and really see as an opportunity to kind of build off of is the URA Land Care Program, which is a localized maintenance program that allows small businesses and nonprofits to participate in vacant lot maintenance for the URA's portfolio of properties. The program launched in September 2016. When we started off with 7 community-based contractors maintaining roughly 350 URA-owned vacant properties. And also, for those of you who don't know what the URA is, it's the Urban Redevelopment Authority. So since then, the program has grown to incorporate the rest of the URA's portfolio and now supports 9 small businesses and nonprofits that actively steward URA properties and is continuously growing. And something we found from this program is that every dollar spent on land care has actually resulted in $6 in sustainable investment. So resulting in more jobs, an increase in business opportunities for these contracting companies. Just from our pilot project back in 2017 or 2016, we saw a 300% increase in opportunities for contractors from year 1 to year 2. So there is a lot of growth for this. We see opportunities to take this program and really revamp it and redevelop it to be a larger program within the city lots. So with those 13,000 lots, there's really room to just kind of connect a similar program as land care, but bring in more local contractors, people who are trying to start businesses, really delve into a new sector such as contracting. It's really an amazing opportunity for people to invest in their communities. And all it really would take is just more investment into local contractors and higher funding for bids. And we could really create this increase in sustainable returns on investment where we're taking care of land and providing direct economic support into communities. And the last feature I'm just going to show today is our community care program, which is actually a program started at Grounded. So community care is a public stewardship program that provides residents with tools, resources, and support to participate in green space maintenance work. The stewards actively maintain green and open spaces throughout their neighborhoods on their own time. So site activities can range from like routine maintenance on a landscape and vacant lot to tending street trees to picking up litter, just really supporting their communities. And they're out there every day, whether that be picking up the trash or helping mow a lot near their house. And this is a year-long program with open applications. We are currently in the neighborhoods of Homewood, Larimer, and the Hill District, and then also Wilkinsburg doing this program. And it definitely has potential to be developed into a larger citywide program. We aspire to hopefully reach every neighborhood one day. And the beauty of this program too is that it's not a volunteer program. This is an incentive-based program. Based on the neighborhood, we have different incentives, but essentially for every hour they gain a credit. And once they reach 8 credits, they're able to cash out. Some programs allow for the $15 an hour credit allowance, and some are more based in utilities, whether that be grocery gift cards or helping pay for gas bills or water bills. There's a lot of room for growth with this, whether that just be the incentives or for income. But it's not even just about the income. It increases social scale, helps connect people within a neighborhood and really tackle these issues hands-on. So while there's a lot of work to be done before these sectors really open up, we see that with change in policy, ownership access, better city funding and county funding and foundation support, we can create more jobs that benefit the entire community, both socially, economically, and aesthetically. And we better tackle these issues of vacant lots. There's, of course, so many thousands of vacant lots in the city and the county. And if we can really work at it together as a community and supporting individuals within that community, we can really make a next step up and really just change how City of Pittsburgh runs. So thank you, everyone. If you want to learn more, feel free to check out groundedpgh.org, and I will pass it back to Cindy.
Thanks, Becca. Thanks for your presentation. So many positive, great projects. Just a reminder, any questions, put in the chat and check out the chat for some links and additional information that some of the presenters have added. So finally, we have John Dawes next. As an executive director of the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds since 1994, Dawes has supervised small grants to over 150 environmental and watershed associations throughout the state. The intent is to provide seed money to allow a local group to access agency funding through the Department of Environmental Protection, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, the Office of Surface Mining, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This has resulted in over $168 million in project costs. The majority of this small grants foundation budget is for abandoned mine reclamation. For 5 years, Dawes was consultant to the Heinz Endowment Environmental Program, where he supervised grants to regional watershed groups pursuing a DCNR Rivers Conservation Plan. Other duties included participation in sustainable forestry roundtables and the facilitation of a statewide watershed advocacy group called POWER, the Pennsylvania Organization for Rivers and Watersheds. Welcome, John.
Cindy, thank you very much, and thank you for the work that you do at Evergreen Conservancy. It's an honor to be here this evening, and I think you covered much of what we do in terms of small grants leveraging agency dollars. And the thing that I like to remember is that every grant out the door to a watershed association is also pertaining to good jobs. If you could put that slide up, one can see the program area of addressing acid mine drainage and the reforestation of abandoned mine lands. There's a summary at the bottom of this slide which shows you some of the outcomes of the grant making that we've done. But in this climate of the Abandoned Mine Lands Fund in Washington, D.C., pilot funding coming through the budget process, we're very hopeful about the infrastructure bill that's before Congress right now. In that bill is $11.3 billion. We've previously dealt in millions. This is $11.3 billion to address the problems of abandoned mine lands and the pollution that they cause every time it rains. And if there's any concern about the amount of work out there, I want you to know that there are 255,000 acres of dead toxic land just in Pennsylvania. And let's move on to the slide of Pittston. This town in the anthracite region is an example of a spoil pile being behind the town, causing acid mine drainage every time it rains. This sorted coal built up over 80 some years behind the building and was sorted from coal that had a higher BTU value that was sent on to cities for heating and steel making. And this pile, has been polluting the adjoining stream for 80 years. There's a reclamation project going on outside of this town on the right-hand side of the slide. So there is no shortage of work, as you can imagine. Let's move on. Next slide. Just this summer, Gina McCarthy from the White House came to one of our sites in the anthracite region, and she came with Secretary of Interior Deb Howland so that she could learn about Eastern coal production and the legacy of coal in Eastern states. She was familiar with Western states and those on Native American lands. But the message from the White House was that day, reclamation equals jobs. And there was a quote that perhaps Robert can affirm to, that these jobs are good paying jobs, some at entry level paying $60,000 a year. So, it's really an interesting time to be tackling this kind of work. And EPCAMR has been a great partner in all of these sites throughout the anthracite region. You can see Robert and Mike Hewitt in that slide up on the left. Let's move on to the next. In the bituminous region, there's a site called Ehrenfeld on the left, and then the Steinman pile, which was reclaimed on the right. This slide demonstrates work that was catalyzed by grants from the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds using pilot, there's an acronym for that, and AMLR funds to complete this work. Both projects were highly polluting every time it rained, sending sediment and heavy metals into adjoining streams. In this case, it's the Little Conemaugh River. Let's go on. Next slide. Ehrenfeld, in particular, won a national award from the Department of Interior, and also an award from the National Association of Abandoned Mine Land Programs. This scar on the land has been removed, as well as the water pollution next to this town that was there for 75 years. In the old slide on the left, one can see how that pile was slumping down into the backyard of houses. And since reclamation took place, they've actually sold some houses in the town. A new house has been built. So it has been a matter of jobs related to construction, particularly related to the reclamation. A coal company got the bid for reclamation and moved that spoil pile and replanted it. And they had 40 unemployed coal miners that were called back to work for 3 years just for this one project. Now, that's the work of the foundation, but I want to move on to something that's deeply personal to me. And that is, next slide, that Huntington Farm. We won an award for the best management practices, and it's something that's very personal to me because I've been here since the age of 22, having owned and managed it. It's a purebred Angus cattle breeding operation, and I've lived here all that time. I call it fortitude. My wife calls it dullness to be in one location that length of time. But agriculture and animal agriculture in particular is being asked to prevent loadings into our waterways like never before, much of it driven by the restoration of the Chesapeake Bay. And the farm is in that watershed. So having the job that I have, we felt that it was very important to implement BMPs or best management practices throughout the farm. And I'll share with you some examples coming up. Next slide. Manure on a cattle farm is always a management problem. And we compost all of the manure on the farm on a concrete pad, not visible in this slide, and let it break down by turning it into compost and treating it with lime. This composted material is the best material to be used on hay fields for healthy soils, rich in organic compounds and ready for plant growth. It also does not pollute the streams as would hot manure if applied and then having runoff from rain. Next slide. Next slide. Now this slide shows how we turn the composted material before land application, allowing full breakdown of it and introducing healthful bacteria and worms which break it down into good nutrients for the soil and plants. This process eliminates our need to buy commercial fertilizers. Next slide. Hard use feeding areas are always a problem on a livestock farm. I don't care if it's horses, cattle, sheep, or swine. These sites can be mitigated by using movable feeders and practicing rotational grazing systems where cattle are moved often to maximize grass production and then the spreading of manure naturally. And in this slide, one can also see in the distance a wetland that sits below this pasture, which takes up extra moisture that would run off or settle into that area. Next slide. Our most obvious best management practice on the farm was the rehabilitation of Emma Creek. Treating legacy sediments is critical to solving the problem of soil loadings into a stream. The first thing to do is to get cattle fenced out of the stream and to engineer effective stream crossings. Emma Creek runs through every pasture on the farm, and restoration was very costly, involving many agencies and partners. And the match dollars were also very high for this project. We had to come up with more than $30,000. Next slide. Since restoration of the stream banks and keeping that sediment out, we've had a return of fish populations, and we do an inventory each year. We've had as many as 11 freshwater species counted in a farm stream that previously had none, or maybe just creek chubs, which are bottom feeders. And the health of the stream has returned. And that means better health for the cattle and people, as well as fishing opportunities. Next slide. This before and after picture demonstrates what we addressed utilizing machine hire and engineering. Those are jobs that are associated with these best management practices. The raw banks of topsoil are a tremendous detriment to water quality, and these exist across the state, are the number one water quality problem listed in the Chesapeake Bay Agreement. Next slide. Here one can see what the problem area was, and then the installation of hemlock logs into the stream, which can hold back sediments, nitrogen, and phosphorus from entering the stream. Now, the science around this type of work, the engineering around it, are also jobs which exist right now. There are not enough people to complete the designs and the implementation of best management practices so that Pennsylvania can meet their portion of the Chesapeake Bay Agreement. Next slide. In order to maximize grazing on a livestock farm, it's important to have well-engineered cattle crossings to move cattle around the farm. If done right, they reduce sediment loadings and can even survive flooding events. Agricultural best management practices mean good jobs. We have an upcoming new 5-year farm bill, and it is the intent of many thought leaders to get more money for conservation into this legislation, as well as production, analogous to the larger amount of dollars that are soon to be available for mine land reclamation through the infrastructure bill. Many of these jobs are with agencies such as county conservation districts and others such as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This is meaningful work, jobs which can become a career, and I encourage those on the Zoom to contact me if you have any questions as to availability and the value of these kinds of jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now we'll have an opportunity for some questions and answers. And if you'll also have an opportunity when we go into the breakouts to ask, more informally ask questions and get some answers on things. We did have one question in the chat. And I guess either John or Bobby can answer this. Bobby replied in the chat, but maybe we could do it for everyone. And the question was, could you give an example of an entry-level job in this space, and also kinds of skills being sought? Are there Pittsburgh-based companies working in this area of mine reclamation that you can identify for us? Maybe Bobby or John?
Cindy, I'll defer to John for the Western Pennsylvania groups that might be more inclined to participate in reclamation projects in the southwestern part of the state. I don't know of a great deal of those. He has partners out there that I'm sure do. I could think of like Stream Restoration Inc. and a few others that do work in that field. But John may have more ties and partnerships in the western part of the state than I do. But conservation districts, as I mentioned before, are in every county except Philadelphia across Pennsylvania here. And within those conservation districts, many times an entry level position in the field of watershed restoration and watershed as a specialist kind of encompasses these areas where they both work on agricultural issues related to water quality. And then in some counties, depending on the amount of mining impacts in those counties, they could be doing quite a bit with the abandoned mine drainage side and the water pollution issues dealt with from legacy mining. So there's some examples there to take a look at. And John and I know both Howard Concrete Pumping, who is a great advocate for abandoned mine land reclamation and reauthorization, and his company has done a lot of work in the field of land reclamation in terms of mine subsidence projects, flushing projects, as an example, to keep places above the ground and not having houses and people's yards subside in parts of southwestern Pennsylvania, I believe. And he's been a great advocate for the work. So maybe John can fill in with some other groups that he would be more aware of than I would.
Robert, thank you very much. Certainly your counterpart in the Western Pennsylvania part of the state is the Western Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation. You mentioned Stream Restoration Inc., which is a nonprofit, highly engaged in mine reclamation design and implementation. Robert Hedden from Environ Oxide, a company that takes iron oxide and dries it and packages it, sells it to paint companies for pigment purposes, is also another entity that could be looking for employees. The thing to remember is that mining has declined, underground mining and surface mining throughout the state. And those trained people in machines, heavy duty machines, are ready, willing, and able to take on some of this work. And oftentimes a mining company will win the contract for reclamation, working with the state through the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation. So I would encourage anyone who is interested to pursue job openings with mining companies. The one entity, which Robert already mentioned, that crosses both mine reclamation and agricultural projects, of course, are the county conservation districts, which exist in every county in the state, with the exception of Philadelphia. So there are 66 of those offices employing a watershed specialist. And to not harp on the Chesapeake Bay issue, but Pennsylvania has signed an agreement and a commitment to reduce sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus to a large extent, like 80%, in the Bay watershed. And the responsibility for that commitment falls down on those county conservation district offices. So they have a very, very good idea of what needs to be done, whether it's through mine sites or agricultural best management practices in targeted areas utilizing GIS. So there are GIS specialists needed to determine where those most effective sites are located. There's something called the Chesapeake Conservancy working in Pennsylvania that's always looking for trained people to assist them on where best to implement those best management practices. So there's a variety of jobs through the conservation districts throughout Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, the conservation districts have agricultural specialists and dirt and gravel road folks that do erosion and sedimentation control issues too. So there's lots of jobs in those conservation districts for sure.
Right.
Something some folks may not realize is that once an abandoned mine discharge is actively or even a passively treated system, it's not just fixed and done. It continues to need stewardship and maintenance into the future. So am I correct in thinking that those jobs are going to continue? They're not just for the initial reclamation. Is that correct?
Well, the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds has a wonderful consultant in the person of Joe Pizarchek, who used to run the Office of Surface Mining Reclamation Enforcement in the Obama administration. He's now our consultant, and we are working very hard on getting national funding to do operation, maintenance, and replacement, OM&R, of passive treatment systems, which Robert previously alluded to as built water infrastructure. We've got 333 of these systems throughout the state, and they are all in a different state of functioning. So once that funding is in place, we estimate that nationally there would be dozens and dozens of good paying jobs that would be permanent, because those treatment systems are analogous to a wastewater treatment plant and need to be monitored. They need to be upgraded. They need to be cleaned, and in some cases replaced. So that's another great opportunity that is on the horizon.
One other question, where can someone who's interested in getting involved in land reclamation work begin? What would be a good entry, or how could they begin to get involved?
Well, we should all be members of our local watershed association so that we have understanding of what's going on locally and in our own watershed. But right now, the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation, with offices in the eastern part of the state and one that's close to where I am in Evansburg, PA, are looking for trained professionals on a pretty regular basis to be able to help with the design and implementation of these kinds of projects. But I would suggest that there are entry level, those jobs requiring a bachelor's degree, those requiring more than that, that are available and going to be more available all the time, because both mine land reclamation funding out of Washington, D.C., and the agricultural best management practice implementation dollars are both on the upswing. I don't see it any other way. So I would encourage anyone at any level to approach a mining company or conservation district office or the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation to get involved.
Okay, thank you. Bobby, do you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I think we've seen this, and for as long as John and I have been around, and it's nearly 30 years of my work in this field, that we're experiencing, seeing a lot of, not so much as turnover as much as retirements. And so folks that we've been working with for a very long time are at the end of their careers, and particularly if they're in the state or the federal government, if you're working for the Office of Surface Mining and Reclamation and Enforcement, or you're working for the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation and the various DEP departments, and there's water and there's abandoned mine reclamation, and there's different divisions within the department that work on various issues. It could be air, land, and water. Those positions are kind of opening up, and we see that, and so we see a lot of younger folks getting into those civil service position jobs that are through the state. And so, I'd encourage any young folks and young professionals to get into the State Civil Service Commission to find out those entry level environmental trainee tests and environmental science tests that are out there that they would have to take an exam to get into. But those are some of the entry level state and sort of federal jobs. There's the Pittsburgh Office out there, the Office of Surface Mining and Reclamation is one place to start. Our Wilkes-Barre office closed many years ago here, so we don't have an office here. And there may be a small office in the Harrisburg region, but many people are working remotely at this point in time. But Pittsburgh does have a bigger office out in the western part of the state. And then I'd encourage even the AmeriCorps program. John has supported, just in our last year, the AmeriCorps Vista, the Volunteers in Service to America program that we've sponsored many of those with this financial support that John has given us to pay for the administrative costs to keep a person with us for a year or 2 years at a time. And they learn all of these skills and firsthand on-the-job training, trainings that they get in the field that sometimes you don't often get in a collegiate class, or the field experience that we need in this particular field. And they get to work with us and can bump into other jobs at the federal level, particularly with the AmeriCorps Vista program through the Office of Surface Mining, that we had a very long established relationship with OSM and the Corporation for National Service and Vista that has brought in people and young people to us. And they're various ages of people that get into the AmeriCorps program that have helped us out throughout the years. And they are great starting, kind of positions to get your feet wet and get your hands dirty in the field of mine drainage, remediation, and land reclamation projects.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, those AmeriCorps positions are great resume building positions too for folks. Becca, did you have some comments?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, as a former AmeriCorps member, I can say it was great to have that experience. I definitely support even increasing those stipends for AmeriCorps members. It's hard work out there and definitely deserves some increased pay. But I just wanted to add in, I think when we're talking about land reclamation, it's understandable, land reclamation comes in a lot of different forms. It could be anything from policy, it could be doing design work, it could be youth engagement, it could be being on the ground, being a contractor, it could be being a supplier of materials for a site. So I would just say keep exploring. If you look at, especially talking about Pittsburgh, there's a lot of amazing organizations that work in land reclamation, whether that be green spaces like us, helping support food system growth like Grow Pittsburgh, expanding access to trees like Tree Pittsburgh. There's a lot of sectors and nonprofits just in Pittsburgh that do this work. They're doing amazing work too, and really with the community and for the community. Like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of ways. Definitely reach out. We're always looking for people who are experienced in writing grants, who have that work being on the ground, are able to be great communicators to residents and be that support line, or even just people who know budgets or know anything about soil health. We're always expanding the sector, and I think that there's a lot of room for people to really be involved in land reclamation in whatever way they feel empowered by too.
Okay, thank you. I think we are going to transition now to the breakout groups. A special thanks to all our panelists for answering the questions, and thank you to everybody who's been watching on Facebook live stream. So welcome back. I hope you all had an opportunity to further engage in conversations around land reclamation. Could someone from each group just briefly report back on some of the things that were discussed?
Well, I was trying to fill Kathy and Heather in a little bit on some work that we were doing in North Central PA in Lycoming County, and we talked about an old friend, Jerry Walls, and some other folks that have worked in the Babb Creek watershed and the Lycoming Creek watershed that we're in right now. And we were discussing the partnerships that we're building there today with a number of partners to address some of the AMD issues in that watershed. And then we got into a little conversation about met coal, which is another market that I think is still viable in terms of coal mining in southwestern PA. And we were just talking about that market in particular versus, we're not seeing a heavy push in the Northeast region for, coal mining, going forward in other places. We see a lot of land reclamation, coal reprocessing, taking in silt basins, the waste coal industries through ARIPA and the independent power producers that are left, like Scrubgrass and a few others in Western PA that have done the same thing to reclaim a lot of these abandoned mine sites. And so I was filling them in a little bit about those partners of ours and the sort of the historical power purchase agreements that were set up that are gone by the wayside now, and they're back to competing with the natural gas markets and prices and having a tough time. But the few that are left are still doing great work, and the work that's been done by that particular trade association and those waste to energy plants has been tremendous here in Pennsylvania, and we really only have a few of those left. And so we count on them quite a bit to do that type of work for us. So we touched a little bit on that, and I filled Kathy in on some of the efforts that we were working on with some really great people and partners in Lycoming County for that time we had.
Right, and Kathy is the League of Women Voters Board representative for the environmental issues. So she's the new person on the Pennsylvania board of the League of Women Voters. So,
and Becca, someone from your group?
So we talked just a little bit more about different opportunities to really gain access to land in the city, especially talking about the Adopt a Lot program in Pittsburgh, which is a process through the Department of City Planning for residents to access city land through licenses and leases, which is a short-term access to land. And we were talking a lot about the progression of this license and leasing to ownership. And that specifically looking at entrepreneurship connections of ownership of land for people to actually access lots long-term and be able to make profits off the land, develop small businesses, build on the land, whatever they choose to do with it. But right now, the access to do that is very limited. There's a lot of holdup between different departments and how liens and taxes are released on vacant lots, especially city-owned vacant lots. There's been a bottleneck of how those lots are pushed through our land bank, our property reserve, sheriff sales, treasurer sales. So there's a lot of work to be done in order for residents to actually be able to obtain land, which is what we're working on a lot at Grounded Strategies, trying to make it an accessible and equitable chance for people to actually own land, both through generational wealth and be able to develop businesses on land. We see as a really big push in the job sector too. And really hopefully a push to increase our population too, instead of where we're at right now, where the population has pretty much stabilized since 2010 and has maintained the same level. Our sectors have slowly been growing in different technology and medical, but being able to really bring that back to a smaller scale entrepreneurship options is really important.
Thanks, Becca.
I just wanted to add, the issue of land ownership is something I always ask about almost no matter what group is talking about what. And the whole issue of land reclamation and whether it's in stream sides or county lands or wherever, to allow some of those reclaimed lands to return to ownership by people who have good plans to use them is not a bad question to ask about if you're having the discussion.
Thank you for that comment. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. As a reminder, check out reimaginejobs.org for more career opportunities and information about land reclamation initiatives. If you are an organization, consider becoming an exhibitor on the site by clicking on Become an Exhibitor on the homepage. Tonight's program is the conclusion of a series of monthly programs diving deeper into the sectors on the website. Follow at Jobs Reimagine on Twitter, at Reimagine Jobs on Instagram, and like Reimagine Jobs on Facebook to stay up to date on future programs and events. Thanks again for joining us, and I think that's it. Have a good night. Thank you, everyone.